Hi, and welcome back. For this unit, we're going to be talking about Chapter 8, which is on motivation and emotion. Student learning outcomes are in the beginning. And to start this out with motivation, I'd ask you, why do anything? So why run a marathon? Why give blood? Why get tattoos all over your entire body? Why do these things? If you see somebody do a behavior, psychologists believe there has to be a reason. So if you observe a behavior, something is driving it. We think that something is motivation. So motivation are forces that act on or within an organism, and they initiate our behavior and they direct our behavior. So they initiate the behavior to give blood, they initiate the behavior to run a marathon, which takes a lot of motivation over a long period of time. These forces can be biological, emotional, cognitive, social, but really there's some kind of force acting on us. Motivated behavior has a couple characteristics that kind of distinguish it. First, the behavior is activated or initiated. So if you want to train for a marathon, you have to get up and start doing that. You have to be persistent, so you have to be determined to reach your goal. And then you have to respond in a way that is intense. So you need a greater vigor of your response. It's not really going to help you run a marathon if you kind of start and then give a 3-week break and sit on your couch and maybe run for 3 minutes the next day. This isn't really going to help you. You need to be intense in your drive to obtain this marathon ability to sustain a marathon. So what we're going to get into next are some concepts or theories behind motivation. There's several different kind of theoretical approaches to motivation. This first one was instinct theories. So early psychologists believed that any type of behavior you would see was motivated in some way by our evolutionary planning. This really fell out of favor pretty early on, but the idea was that we would have motivations or kind of instincts like secretiveness, disgust, fear, that if you could see these behaviors, they must be tied back to some kind of instinct. We don't really believe that now. We have several theories that are still in fashion or that we still do kind of believe or derive work from. The first of this is drive theory. So this theory is kind of suggests that we have a drive to meet our biological needs. So this doesn't explain all drives. It can explain things like why you might work hard for a bottle of water or drive to the store to get something to eat. But it doesn't explain why you might paint happy little trees or, create works of art. That's not really meeting a biological need. Some other types of motivation are incentive motivation. So this is being motivated by an external goal. So if you go to your job, most of us are going to be motivated by incentive motivation. So you get money to go work. And we kind of call this a pull. So it's pulling you, whereas the drive theories were more of a push. Incentive motivation is based on learning principles. So we learn that money gets us rewards or it gets us what we need, and so we're incentivized to do those behaviors. Arousal theory says that we want optimal stimulation. So we don't want to be too highly stimulated or not stimulated enough. And what this kind of means is just our general levels of arousal. It's not a sexual type of theory. What we're going to do then, instead of seeking too high or too low, is seek a happy medium. So this can look different for some people. Your happy medium might be downhill skiing, where mine might be curling up with a good book. So our medium can be a little bit different, but still we're trying to obtain optimal arousal. We also see this with monkeys. So monkeys in this box were given these locks they could play with. The locks didn't do anything, but the monkeys still played with them for hours because it kept them busy. Humanistic theory says that we are motivated to achieve our greatest potential. What we're going to get into next is some of our greatest motivators. So we're going to talk about eating, hunger and eating, and then talk about sex. So these are some of our biological motivations that are our strongest. So the difference between hunger and eating: hunger is our biological motive, whereas eating is a more complex interaction. So we can see this kind of statement here from Louis C.K. saying, "The meal is not over when I'm full, the meal is over when I hate myself." That type of behavior is eating. That's a very complex psychological type of approach. Hunger is really that biological motive. You can review this graph on energy homeostasis, but generally we know if we intake more than we lose, we gain weight. If we expend More than we intake, then we lose weight. So you can kind of see the gain and loss. Some signals that help us know when to eat or regulate our appetite. Things like ghrelin. Ghrelin we call a hunger hormone. It goes up right before we eat, goes down after our meals. There's a lot of psychological factors that play into our eating as well. Classical conditioning, so we know at noon it's time to eat. That time of day elicits the physical changes, as well as operant conditioning. So some foods just have this positive incentive value that make us feel good. Things like donuts, fried chicken, we want to eat those, so that's operant conditioning. We have several signals that tell us when we're done, satiation signals. So this relates to stretch hormones, receptors in the body. We also have sensory specific satiation. Can't speak today. So this is the reduced desire to continue eating one specific type of food. So you might really enjoy bread and be eating the bread and then kind of not want that anymore after a while and want some salad instead. So you still have room for food, but you're just kind of tired of one food. Our long-term signal for weight regulation or for eating regulation is leptin. So this is a hormone. When the level's higher, our food intake is lower. We have rats. We've been able to see rats that are leptin deficient, so they don't have any high levels of leptin. They're not capable of that, and their food intake is just massive. When we inject them with leptin, their food intake goes down because they have a higher level then, and they end up becoming more slender. So we know this is an important long-term signal. And this graph kind of shows the leptin-ghrelin interaction. Our body weight. So we know, definitely review the models of body weight and kind of this information, but there's a couple theories as to how we maintain body weight. One is that our body will defend an optimal weight. So if your optimal weight is 150, your body will defend that weight. This is our set point theory. But really we think what's truly happening, more than the set point theory, is a settling point model. And so this is where your weight is going to settle at a balance between what you take in and what you burn. So even if your optimal weight might be 150, if you're taking in and burning approximately to keep you at the 250 range, you might weigh 250. So your body's kind of settled at 250. Obesity we know is common, really complex. This will show you how to calculate your BMI, which is an important indicator of obesity. Also shows you these ranges, so you could spend some time doing that if you want to. We know there's a lot of factors that go into why people are obese, so I'll kind of put these up real quick, but things like too little sleep or supersize it syndrome, so it's really easy and cheap to get some extra food. The basal metabolic rate, which is kind of how much you burn at rest. This can change over your lifespan. There's some individual differences there. And we also know that obesity is really tied in with sleep. And so when we have people reduce from 8 hours to 5 hours of sleep, we see their body mass increase go up, their leptin go down, their ghrelin go up. So sleep is really, really tied into weight. We also know that dopamine plays an important role in weight. So people and rats who've been fed a lot of junk food or who are obese, they have a reduced dopamine response to sweet types of food or to junk food. So someone who's a normal weight may eat a little sliver of cheesecake and their brain lights up with dopamine. Someone who's obese or junk food addicted might eat that same piece of cheesecake and have a very, very muted response. So this is similar to what we see with drug addicts, and it's a vicious cycle. So they need more and more, people who are obese need more and more of these high caloric foods in order to get the same dopamine response, which further dampens their dopamine response. The next topic is human sexuality. So the drive to engage in sex is a basic motive, but it's very different from the drive to eat because you don't have to have sex to live. We need it as a species, but not as individuals. Masters and Johnson's really told us a lot about sex. So they were some of the first people to really understand sex from a scientific viewpoint. They watched hundreds of people engaged in lots of episodes of sexuality. Oops. Many people believed or worried that their work would dehumanize sexuality, but they were also praised for really helping us to understand more about sex. They learned a lot through their work. We've got some stages of the response cycle here, which you can review, as well as some of these variations on sexual response. So they really taught us a lot about what to expect from sex and what sex looks like in humans. For motivation for sex, we know it's necessary for the survival of the species. For lower animals, what we call lower animals, they're really motivated for sex by their hormones. But higher animals are motivated by many different things: learning, the environment, social relationships, hormones. We can see this in the bonobos, which we call the make love, not war monkeys, and really they're motivated by bridging ties, social relationships, and they're really fun little monkeys. Evolution and mate preferences is some more work we've done on sexuality. We know that one gender often will seek youth, physical attractiveness. The other will seek financial security, social status, prospects. So you might guess which is which. We have men seeking youth, women seeking financial security. But really, when you ask people, across 37 cultures, the number one thing they report is love, that they're looking for love. So most men don't say, well, I'm looking for someone who looks like they could bear my kids, they're young, they're physically attractive. No, most of us will say that love is what we're looking for. Sexual orientation is a really, really interesting topic, so I would definitely encourage you to watch these videos here that are linked. I think they're really interesting. But we don't really know for sure what determines sexual orientation. So scientists know that genetics are important, especially for men. We also know that men that have more older brothers are more likely to identify as homosexual, which we think may be an immune response. And that there's some things with brain structure. So we're really, really not sure what's going on. But we know that sexual orientation does develop early, it's resistant to change, and there's a lot of factors influencing this. Another finding that we have found with a lot of research is that children who are raised by individuals who are LGBT, they're very well adjusted, very similar to children raised by heterosexual couples. And that's going to pull us into psychological needs as motivators. We think these needs have to be fulfilled for people to reach their optimal human functioning. Maslow is a really popular theory of psychological needs, and he says we kind of start at the bottom of this pyramid. We need to meet our physiological needs before we can move up into things like esteem needs and eventually into self-actualization. People who reach self-actualization have a lot of characteristics. You can kind of review this, but really they're spontaneous, they have peak experiences. This theory has been very popular. A lot of people have referenced this theory, but it has some critiques. The theory is a little bit vague, difficult to test, and many of us won't ever reach the top of that pyramid. So many of us will be stuck kind of trying to meet our safety needs or our belongingness needs. There are some people who we definitely view as self-actualized, but for many of us it'll be out of reach. Another theory for psychological motivators is self-determination theory. You can kind of review what's needed here: belongingness, need to control, the ability to master tasks. Motivation, though, in self-determination theory is something really important that a lot of people will reference. This is that you can have a task, could be any task, so taking this psych class. Some of you will take this psych class for intrinsic motivators. So the task is inherently satisfying to you. You're curious, you want to learn. Others will take it for purely extrinsic reasons. So they need the grade to get the career they want or the praise that they need for different things to move up in their job. So it can be the same task, but different motivators. Our last topic is on emotion. So we know that emotions have a couple components. You have a subjective experience, a body or physiological response, and a behavioral response. We also have some basic emotions like fear, anger, disgust, happiness. There's a little bit of discrepancy over which ones comprise the basic emotions, but generally we find these ones, fear, surprise, anger, disgust, happiness, sadness, to comprise our basic emotions. The difference between emotions and mood: with emotion we're talking about something that's complex, short-lived. With mood, this is more long-lasting. Emotions have a lot of functions. They really are a form of motivation. They help move us to action, they aid our decision-making, and they signal others. So if you were to walk in your house and see one of your family members looking like Dawson looks here, you're going to go, oh no! It's going to signal you that you need to help that person. Gender and emotion is really interesting. So we often believe that men and women have a very different emotional experience, but when we ask people, they really do have no difference in their self-ratings. Instead, they have differences in what they express. We think this is really because of culturally determined display rules, so what we accept as a culture from people of different genders, rather than what they're actually experiencing. You can review the information on neuroscience, but we know the sympathetic nervous system is active here. The amygdala is really important, so when the amygdala is damaged, we lose the ability to distinguish between threatening and friendly faces. Darwin thought our emotion expressions were innate and universal. Paul Ekman tested this theory in different countries and found that this was the case. People are highly accurate in rating emotions. The last part of the chapter is on emotion theories, or theories of emotional experience. So the James Lange theory says that we experience a stimulus, our body changes, and then we experience that as a subjective experience of emotion. The facial feedback hypothesis says that our face will move in different ways, and then we'll experience that as emotion. And finally, the cognitive appraisal theory says we have a situation that occurs, we appraise that situation, and then we feel our emotion.